For many in the Republic of Syria, the Arab Spring is far from over. Thousands of protesters continue to gather in the country's cities, hoping to emulate the regime changes that have occurred recently in Egypt and Tunisia. As seen in this footage, as with most uprisings across the Arab world, much of the mass protests have been spurred on and publicized by amateur YouTube videos and Facebook campaigns.
Very recently, by the way, Facebook was banned in Syria. And the government decided to allow it because they wanted to monitor what's going on there. But one difficulty we face in Syria is the fact that the Syrian government disallowed independent media, any media, from into the country. This is why all of the young activists, in fact, have become journalists.
As these images of human rights violations and intimidation stream across the world, a delegation of Syrian academics, human rights activists, and opposition leaders have come to South Africa to convince our government to agree to a UN Security Council resolution condemning the suppression of anti-government protests in Syria.
Given its increasing weight in the international scene, South Africa faces a particular responsibility to issue a clear condemnation of the gross human rights abuses that are taking place in Syria and to support the UN Security Council's draft resolution denouncing the violence.
It's not a question of if the revolution will topple the regime in Syria, it's a question of when. And as such, we look to South Africa to take leadership in helping the Syrian people minimize the casualties and shortening the period of the brutal suppression and brutal crackdown by the Syrian regime.
South Africa, who is a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, are one of only 5 member states to refuse the resolution, the others being Brazil, Russia, India, and China.
I'm surprised that young people of Syria who are taken to the street do not very much appreciate the position of South Africa as if it were to try to block a Security Council resolution condemning the human rights violation in Syria.
The delegation also felt that given South Africa's history of popular uprising overthrowing an oppressive regime, that our leaders should be more sympathetic to their cause.
I think we in South Africa judged people around the world based on their actions 20 years ago. And we formed our own impressions of who our friends were and who were not. I think we're faced with similar choices today, and it's important, I think, that that the South African government not be allowed to get away with evading the issue.
The process of change is inevitable because people will not accept the kind of repression that they've lived under. They have lost the fear of the regime and they will change. And tomorrow's leaders of the Middle East will also remember who supported them. And it would be a real tragedy if South Africa, which has gone through its own struggle, finds itself on the wrong side of history, basically, with this new Middle East.